It's because we are live. Good morning, everyone. We are live. Oh my goodness, the heat. I was on a call. We're just good morning if you're joining us. Obviously, we're talking about the heat, right? I was on a call 2 days ago. I was in Birmingham on this call, and I was on this call with inclusion leaders in Florida, and it was hotter in Birmingham than Florida. But we have no aircon, or I didn't, at least in the building that I was in. Yeah.
All my American friends are like, "Oh, you poor things. It's really cool here." Well, yeah, because you live in a fridge. A refrigerated house, you get into a refrigerated car, you get into a refrigerated office.
Yeah.
You are the problem that we are all suffering from.
Well, do you know what? Yeah, it does make you think. It makes you think about a lot of things. And I thought actually the title of today's session, "Sustaining ERG Momentum Without Burning Out," we're physically burning out. Never mind the kind of like the sort of like emotional level. But it does make you think about a lot of things in terms of there's a lot of conversation about the inequity of climate change. Do you know what I mean? And how it affects different countries. And I think this, it definitely made me think about that. Like the last few days, I thought we don't often think about, the countries in the global south that are really impacted, because of flooding and things like that. So yeah, it was a real reminder to me, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're all moaning about it, but this is 3 days.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's people who A, have this pretty much all the time, B, have no shelter, C, have no running water, etc. And I mean, now that it's the chickens have come home to roost in Northern Europe, everybody's talking about it.
Yeah, karma. It's karma. So, Kate, thank you so much for joining this, especially in these conditions, because I thought to myself, I thought I might just literally end up just sitting here and just perspiring literally for the whole LinkedIn Live conversation. So we'll see how we get on. If it gets too hot, we might have to like cut it short a little bit. But we're talking about sustaining ERG momentum without burning out, and we literally just had the ERG Leaders Summit last week in London, and this topic came up. We talked about managing energy levels, especially for the employee networks that are trying to kind of push the boundaries of what they're doing, and not only doing, the events and things like that, trying to do bigger things. So really good topic. So I'm gonna read your intro, Kate. There is a little bit of a tradition on this show where I get Claude to write your bio.
Oh my goodness!
And then you get to score it out of 10. So here goes. Today I'm joined by Kate Philpot. Kate is a senior sales enablement leader at Getty Images and an ICF certified coach. And she sits on boards and advisory panels alongside her leadership role. She's also an ERG Co-Chair, having founded her organization's Multicultural Network from scratch, and she's an advisory board member for Black Women in Tech. She's been shortlisted for the Nova Inspirational Leader Award and named among Computer Weekly's most influential women in tech. And she's a regular speaker at events like the Sales Enablement Collective Conference and the Every Woman Summit. So she knows what it takes to lead a network whilst holding down a big day job. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you.
How did Claude do? Marks out of 10 for Claude's bio?
Was not bad. There were a couple of inaccuracies.
Of course.
Right? The thing about AI is it's very confident that it's right. It's my experience of late, and it's not always.
Yeah, confidently wrong, like wrong and strong.
Yeah.
Let's so just in terms of this this topic here, sustaining ERG momentum without burning out. What made you want to talk about this topic? So before we dive into it, why was this kind of almost like, I guess, maybe front of mind for you, or what have you seen around it?
Because it's a live conversation within our business. Yeah. So the Multicultural Network, as Claude correctly identified, is the first ERG at Getty Images, but now we have, I'm probably going to get the number wrong, it's at least 6, maybe at least 7. And we had a recent symposium of all of the ERG leaders for each of the we have a charter team for each ERG, and those leaders got together for, it's a global group, so a couple of days, but, spread over relevant time zones. And this was a common, probably the most discussed challenge. So it felt like a good topic to jump on. Obviously, I'm interested to hear what people watching think as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you are watching, as I always sort of say, drop a good morning in the chat. And also, I usually say, tell us what the weather is where you are, but I think I probably know what the weather is. It's certainly if you're based in the UK. But yeah, please do say good morning if you're doing. And also, I guess if this topic resonates for you as well, especially if you are in the ERG space. So a really interesting one. Obviously, you've got a big day job, and a lot of ERG leads do. Certainly, when we've done research, ERGs typically are at least manager level and upwards, right? So they definitely have got big jobs. So what made you want to do the ERG alongside such a big role?
Well, I think as for a lot of ERGs that are centered on people from minority ethnic backgrounds, there was a tipping point thing that happened back in 2020, which was the murder of George Floyd. And I think that plus the confluence of COVID, everybody being dispersed, and we were all sent to work from home, as I guess a lot of people were. There was that thing outside the organization. And I think a lot of organizations at the time were struggling with how to respond in a way that didn't appear performative. And, those black squares, I think we can probably all remember. And I think a lot of the people at the time, there was a small group within our business, probably 8 of us. We used to basically just kind of cross paths in meetings or sometimes on Zoom, bearing in mind that 6 years ago, Zoom was not the thing that it is now. And so we used to just catch up, and we had a sort of spontaneous meeting and thought, oh, you know what, let's see if there are any more people. And before we knew it, we're gathering to talk about the thing that just happened. And as I say, it was the 8 people, the sort of original group. And then all of a sudden we had this meeting, people told people and people told people. And the first gathering, which wasn't at this point an ERG, there were about 80 people turned up. And almost without, I will never forget it, almost without exception, people joined and went, I thought I was on my own. So, one of the challenges was because we are very geographically dispersed, a lot of those individuals were the only, we probably all know how that feels because that's been the way of things for so long. But even in the US, there were individuals who showed up and went, I had no idea you guys were all here. So that was really, it was very sort of spontaneous from that point, because that then started a conversation. We talked about our experiences outside of the 4 walls of our organization. We talked about our experiences inside the organization. And so we actually first built what was called the BAME community. I hate that word, but anyway, it was the easiest thing to describe us at the time. So it started with that. And we did a survey because we thought, you know what, people don't understand. They don't, if what they're saying outside, if what organizations are saying about what happened to George Floyd is in some cases as tone deaf as it was falling. And to be fair, our CEO did an amazing job because that we have a company Slack channel, and comments were put on the Slack channel about, are we going to do a statement? And his initial response was, no, I don't want to do that because I don't want to look like I'm paying lip service. And I remember thinking, yes, true. And at the risk of losing my job, I said, but it's not about you. It's about your employees who need to feel that how they feel right now matters to this organization. And actually, to his eternal credit, he said, okay, fair comment. What should I be saying? So, the fact that we had this group of people, myself and my partner, Cassandra, who's in the US, who eventually became the co-chair, we worked on the statement that was eventually put out in public. And that then started the ball rolling about, okay, so great, thank you so much for saying that stuff. That really matters, and we are grateful that you did that. But there's some stuff inside the business that we'd like you to attend to as well. So we did this survey of our community, and we shared it with the global leadership team. And again, to their credit, they sat and they listened. Some of those messages, I think, weren't particularly palatable at the time, or certainly came as a surprise. I think particularly the external piece, I think, I will never forget, one of the questions that we asked of our community was, we did it on a Likert scale. I am fearful of law enforcement. And I think the response was like 85%. Imagine, if you're in the US, even outside of the US, yeah, for sure. And when we presented that data, our leadership team at the global level I think at the time there was no people of color on the global leadership team. So when they're presented with that, it's like the connection of, people that we employ, who we rate in our business, have that going on for them when they leave the four walls, which for members of the global leadership team was a complete, I think for a lot of them, it was really confronting. And it was probably the first time, that anybody had actually said, it's different for us. Same as I get followed around a store by a security guard, that kind of thing. So I think it was a real kind of light bulb moment. And out of that, long story short, came a commitment to establish employee resource groups. Nice. and funding to support them as well, which I think is really important. Maybe get into that a little bit later.
I love I love that the story that you've told there of how it started, that kind of very organic, a few people coming together, that then it's a really good example of when it's just done organically out of a need, and it almost feels, I'm sure that there are still, particularly in the UK, there are still some organisations now that are creating ERGs, even though we're sort of like 6 years post George Floyd, but there are still organisations doing it now. So I think hearing that was really useful, and some of the things that you said there in terms of getting the data, and actually it's the data around the experience. So I know some people do that in other ways, they might do listening circles or whatever, but that data around having a different experience, I think, is so important, and it's still relevant now, so maybe for some of the people that are listening, particularly if you are leading, multicultural networks or, LGBTQ plus networks in particular, those communities that are, coming under attack in terms of like popular rhetoric at the moment. There's definitely some lessons there in terms of how to approach it, and getting that data to keep it visible, the fact that people are having a different lived experience. I was going over to my daughter's who lives in Birmingham last weekend on Saturday to dog sit for a little bit while she was out, and she sent a message to me, and she said, because I said, I'll just get the train over. And she said, don't get the train over because there's a Britain First march, so you might want to drive in. Do you know what I mean? And just even having to think about something like that, it's and raising the awareness levels. This is part of what ERGs do. Somebody used the term for me a couple of weeks ago. The term was the canaries in the coal mine. That's what ERGs are,
Yeah, they are. I think back to the topic of burnout.
Yeah.
The challenge, though, is at what point do you stop wanting to be or feeling that you need to be the canary?
Yeah.
We've had conversations since 2020 about, what? It shouldn't take us, whether it is the MCN, the Multicultural Network, our Rainbows, which is the LGBTQIA plus Alliance, whether it is women, it shouldn't take the ERG to go, hey, you know what? This group is under attack. I mean, there was a point, when COVID was in full flow, that our Asian colleagues were regularly getting attacked in the US, actually not just in the US, in the street. And there were people, at the time we had more of the members of the Asian community in our network, they've since created a separate one, which is absolutely as it should be. But they were coming to our meetings and saying, I'm afraid that my elderly grandparents or my parents are going to be attacked in the street. Hard to concentrate on your work when that's going on. And it shouldn't take the members of the ERG to say, hey, people who run the business, you might want to acknowledge this. What are we going to say? How do we say recognize? It's not to say fix it. We're not asking them to fix it, but we're asking people to be more conscious. And I think there is a connection between feeling burnt out and always feeling like, whatever group you represent, feeling that you have to go, hello, do you see the thing that is happening?
Yeah, that's a really that's a really interesting point that you make, and I had somebody on here maybe last year, and we were talking about almost like what is it that contributes to the burnout, because I think sometimes people assume it's workload, right? And I'm not saying that there isn't a connection between workload, but actually I think what you were saying there is there's something about having to do that emotional labor actually that contributes to it as well. So there is something about, I don't know what your thoughts are in terms of how much of it is workload, I'm doing 2 jobs, and how much of it is it's the emotional labor of always having to be the one that's saying, hey, can you consider this, that, and the other?
I think it's a bit of both.
I
think it's a bit of both. I mean, myself and my counterpart both have big jobs, and for a long time we were the only senior people of color at that level in the organization. So there's that, plus trying to do the work to make sure that the ERG stays front of mind. Doing the work to help bring other people to the fore, so that number one, we get more help to sustain the ERG, but number two, that some really smart people get exposure that they wouldn't otherwise get. And then there is, yes, that other part of things are going on outside the 4 walls that impact our ability to be fully present at work. I mean, we're not fully present at work, but it means that you're carrying, again, almost irrespective of your particular, personal responsibility or membership of an ERG, you are carrying that plus the responsibilities of your work. And I think it is that intellectual overload, maybe is too strong a word, but I think it contributes, having to think about more things.
I mean, as a lot of ERG leaders talk about having 2 jobs, right? It is almost like you go to work and you have 2 jobs, or you wear at least 2 hats. And so I wondered, the next question that I wondered was, in terms of the way that the network is set up and or structured, and I don't know what your setup is, in addition to like having a co-chair, but I guess there's something about how much of the network setup or your committee structure can help to reduce the risk of burnout. How important is that, do you think?
I think it's really important. You even if you are the co-chair of an ERG, you cannot hope to do it all by yourself. And so inviting people to be part of, so we have a charter team, all of the ERGs have a charter team. There will be a number of people on that charter team. It could be two or three, it could be half a dozen, and whatever the number, for me, the ideal is to share the responsibilities. What we found when the early meetings with our ERGs, people were keen, but really low on confidence. So, for example, Cassandra and I would say, would somebody like to chair the next drop-in? And a lot of people would just go, please don't make me do that. No, I can't possibly. I can't. No, don't make me be the person. And so we ended up doing things like, okay, well, so this is what it looks like. This is how you build the agenda. This is how you chair the meeting. We're literally just inviting people to participate. We'll co-do it for maybe the next one. And then how about you do the next one on your own? That kind of thing, in the end, really paid dividends, because we have more people now who are confident enough to schedule the session, manage the distribution list, send out the agenda, run the meeting. So it doesn't all fall on, you know, two sets of shoulders. So I think that's really important. And I think, you know, this is something that, I mean, our HR team oversee our ERG program. They manage, you know, they oversee the budget. We make submissions for budget if we want to spend it. And they ran the symposium that we had a couple of weeks ago. And, you know, our contact as part of the HR team is incredibly supportive of ERGs and the charters, and is there for, you know, any kind of needed support or guidance. And we've had several conversations collectively about how do we sustain the ERGs without feeling like we have to do all the work. And the reality is, I think, forgive me for anybody that's listening, I think there is a percentage of people generally who are happy for other people to do the work. So they'll show up and they'll talk and they'll share, and actually some people won't even show up. I mean, they'll be notionally part of the community, but they won't necessarily show up. And I think they just kind of need to know that it exists. But, you know, asking the vast majority to do more than that, oftentimes falls on deaf ears. And so what we've found is that there is probably a hardcore of 50, 60 people that are really engaged, who show up as much as their calendars, their job, their workload permit. But the membership of our community, as currently measured, is about 130 people. And there was a time when we were really, really obsessed with how do we get them all to join. We need to see more of these people. What's going on? Why do they not want to engage? And over time, we have arrived at a point where we're like, well, they know we're here, and they know when the meetings are happening, and we try and make them as, you know, time zone friendly as we can. So maybe they don't want to, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I see a lot of ERGs go from like sort of setup to, you know, varying levels of maturity depending on what the organization needs and depending on where things are. But I loved what you said about, you know, the committee, and sometimes, and I see this in a lot of organizations where you end up potentially with committees of lots of people that sometimes, and they've even got lots of ideas, but nobody wants to do the work. And it's really common. Yeah, it's really common.
And I think sometimes it is they don't know how to.
Yeah.
And again, back to the two jobs thing. I mean, my job is enablement. I mean, I'm literally enabling people to do more things.
Yeah.
But that's the day job. And so finding the time to do that with members of the community who might have a good idea but don't know how to execute is super, super difficult. And I guess in any environment, any work environment, there will be people who just go, I'm just going to work it out, you know, and you kind of wind them up and point them in the right direction, and they'll come back and go, well, I've done this and now I've got stuck, so what do I do? You know, that kind of person will always be fine, and they'll probably always muddle through, and they probably always will 99% work it out. And then there'll be people that, you know, we all know who don't. And I think, again, as an ERG, you learn this in leadership, in just general terms, out with ERG specifically, that there are different levels of will and there are different levels of skill. And you can develop skill. Will is a bit harder to develop. And so, I think what we have learned over the years is to be a bit more pragmatic and a bit more okay with those who want to engaging, and those who don't, not so much. That, however, is not to say that we don't regularly need to do a sweep, because again, back to, I didn't know that, you were all here, because we're globally distributed and because we still have a hybrid working setup. It's actually easy to miss when people join the business. So regularly we're going, hello, haven't seen you at one of our meetings. Did you know? That kind of thing, just to make sure that people aren't being completely overlooked, inadvertently overlooked.
Absolutely. I keep it needs to be included in more of the induction and the onboarding, like letting people know that like these networks are here. I know of some organizations that auto enroll people in the, like they have an ERG for like new starters. So they auto enroll everyone in the new starters, and then now the other ERGs are figuring out how the new starter ERG can then signpost to the relevant ones. That can be a way.
That's an interesting approach, actually. I mean, we have a global onboarding, so there is an enterprise onboarding, and then there is a sales specific onboarding. Managers have specific responsibility to talk about ERGs, the existence of ERGs as part of that initial onboarding. How often? Hard to say. That is a loop that definitely could do with a bit more attention. But predictably, I will always say to my team, make sure you tell people these things exist. So yes, the auto enrollment part is a challenge because, as I say, we've got a globally distributed organization. There are certain countries where you can't ask people what their ethnicity is. France, for example, apparently doesn't exist. So we do. I mean, as Sophia has said, sometimes on an all hands, I'll be scrolling through screens and I've seen that person, and I will, be slacking them saying, hello, we've got an ERG. I notice you're not in it. Would you like me to send you them? That kind of thing. And people have the option to say yay or nay. No, I mean,
absolutely.
It's not great, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I wouldn't want is people sitting in X or Y or Z office or their home thinking, am I the only person? Because that's where we were 6 years ago. So, I mean, as much as our HR team can support, they do. But we sort of globally have a self-identification request in terms of any, particular specialty, whether that is your ethnicity or your, your orientation, any of that stuff. But it's self-offered, and so you don't do. And we still find it people who are reluctant to, for I guess plenty of understandable reasons.
I just want to get into something that you mentioned before about the responsibility of organizations, and I think there is almost this thing of I'm looking at a couple of the people that we've got in the comments. Jenna, good morning. Sylvia, Anna, good morning. And Sophia as well, and to anybody else that's watching. But I think you made a really interesting point about the role of the organization and there almost being too much burden on the individual. And it reminded me of something that is in Emma Greed's recent book, which is behind me or around somewhere. But one of the things that she said, and I'm listening to her book for research as well as, just the content, but she said that employees shouldn't have to be worrying about, is my business inclusive of me? If I'm, a different color, I am not represented at the top, or, I'm part of the LGBTQ plus community, or I've got a disability, etc. Her view is almost like, I would rather that employers are really just focusing on their role, like the day job that they've been paid to do, but that absolutely organizations should be doing the heavy lifting of, let's make sure, do you know what I mean? And I guess that's nirvana. So I guess maybe I was thinking about, I think there is that thing about how do we almost like get to that point where the organizations are doing more of the heavy lifting, or have you seen anything that particularly works, whether it be with specific, exec members, etc., over your time?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in response to Emma, yes, of course they should.
Yeah.
Because, oftentimes there's a gap between the aspiration and the reality. I mean, many organizations have got policies that support all of those things. Again, whether it is, you should not be discriminating against somebody because of their color or because of their orientation, or because they're a woman, or of course you shouldn't. And there are probably other policies about you should be really checking to see are all of those people progressing through your organization at the same rate as the white male majority, for example. And we do, in our organization, we do those things. However, I guess the challenge, or the thing that stops nirvana being fully realized, is we employ humans, and humans have a tendency sometimes to not do what they're asked to do, even if that is subconscious. And so this is where the disconnect can arise. And so one of the things that we've said as an ERG is it is not our job to be the company policeman. We're not going to play that part. But what we will do is we will say, here are things that we see from our perspective that appear to be a disconnect between the things that as an organization we say that we want to do. And actually something I should have said a few minutes ago is for each of the ERGs, we have a sponsor on the global leadership team. So if we find that, or if we're perceiving, sometimes it is perception and it may not be reality, that there is a disconnect between what is said and what is done, then, and we don't feel that we are able to fix it particularly, then we will connect with our sponsor and we will say, hey, there's a thing and it's this, and can you please raise it with your peers, because it's an issue. And certainly from our perspective, our sponsor is massively engaged. We have a 6-month catch up with him. We will do a lie of the land, and we can be completely honest. I mean, I don't think there's any of the sponsors with whom the respective ERGs can't be honest. Sometimes there is stuff that people are not aware of that means that the thing cannot completely happen. But I think that is really important. The sponsorship from on high is vital. And I should also said, when our CEO made the pronouncement that he made, he was the one that effectively sponsored the creation of ERGs. Obviously, it was then sort of sent off to HR to manage, but he has sponsored it right from the get-go and continues to. And I think that level of senior level sponsorship is absolutely vital.
For sure. I mean, as you're talking there, actually, especially like about the CEO, almost like setting out the stall and kind of like, I don't want to say giving permission, but kind of endorsing, ERGs. It reminded me of the very first ERG, the Xerox ERG, which was very much kind of supported by their CEO at the time, Joe Wilson, working like with the civil rights movement. That's part of kind of what started the whole ERG and supply diversity and everything. And I always sort of say, to me, it's no coincidence that Xerox was, the first organization to have a black female CEO. Do you know what I mean? There's something about a CEO that can really set the tone. And as well, what you said about the sponsor, because as you were giving the answer, I was thinking very much about the role of the sponsor, in particular, as almost like being that. I'm not sure it's always used in that way, but almost like being that level of support as well for the co-chair, right? And taking some of that emotional burden. I always think, especially when they don't necessarily have the same shared lived experience, but actually when they're an ally that really advocates for the network, I think that can be really powerful in terms of taking off some of the burden.
I think it's an imperative. And I mean, something that we were quite conscious of was asking. So we decided who we would like to be our sponsor. And I think that has really made a difference. And, to Sophia, your question, I think our survey really helped, because that was like the level set is what the world that you all probably know. Here is the world that we know. Here is the size of the gap. Here is what that means from an external perspective. Here's what that means for us as employees. That was the jumping off point for the conversation. Broadly, with a few exceptions, the global leadership team of 2020 is pretty much the global leadership team of today. So that continuity has been really helpful because, you know, our sponsor knows the history, knows how we started, knows why we started, and has been our sponsor for therefore 6 years, which now I say it out loud is pretty amazing. I think that, you know, like any onboarding, if your sponsor is new, it's this is really important, taking the time to sit down with that person and say, here's how we came into being. Let us walk you through the history of this ERG. I mean, in our case, that means let's show you the 5 years of our surveys, because we do them every year. And bearing in mind that back to it's a lift, yes, indeed it is, because we have an enterprise employee engagement survey, but we do our own survey. And we do our own survey annually off the back of the survey that we did back in 2020, because, you know, back to Cheryl, your point, because we want to remind the organization of the things that it said that it was committed to doing. And that allows us, you know, not unreasonably to acknowledge where progress has been made, because it has. You know, we go to our website now and you input search for businessman, likely the first image that you get will not be a white bloke in a suit. Whereas 6 years ago, that was definitely the case. So we've been able to shift the understanding of some, again, inadvertent or unconscious biases that as an organization, we were at risk of perpetuating. So I think, if, as I say, back to my point, if you have a new sponsor, they've got to understand how you got to this point. And then the second part, okay, and so where do we go from here? What are the current challenges? What help do we need from you? And I think they have to be senior. You need somebody with a bit of clout.
I think another way of connecting, absolutely echo what you said there, Kate. And another way of connecting, I think, with a new sponsor, especially if I'm assuming if the sponsor doesn't have the same shared lived experience, so maybe, or even if they do, right? But maybe you're struggling to connect with them. You know, something that you can do is, because what you're trying to do, I always think you're trying to tap into, you're trying to almost like tap into that sponsor's motivation. Like, how can you almost create a personal connection? And sometimes, so if you've got the data, you know, so for example, you've surveyed, or even if you haven't surveyed, you know, another way of getting data is if there are, for example, if it's you and a co-chair and maybe a couple of committee members, or say if there's 5 of you, maybe you each choose 3 or 4 questions that you want to ask people, and you each commit to speaking to 5 different people and asking them the same question. Like, that's data. Like, just start there with like an easy data set that you can take to them. So that's the one thing you can do. But also the other thing I would say is try to, unfortunately I can't get his time, if you're in the same country as I've assumed it's him, but it could not be. His time. If you're in the same country as him, you need to potentially consider stalking him. This is something that I talked about a few weeks ago with somebody else. But sometimes if say, for example, if this is a board member or senior leader, and they have like a monthly senior leader team meeting or a monthly exco or whatever, find out where they're going to be, turn up at that office, maybe early, grab them on a break. Like, literally, sometimes you've just got to you've got to like figure out how to find them, and you've got to like work out your little elevator pitch, or you kind of work through their EA, you know, to try to get some time. But
why is he your, I mean, and this is not a criticism, Sophia, at all, but I'm wondering, why is he your,
are they the right person?
If he doesn't want to talk to you. And then back to Jenna, your point, maybe this is something he's, you know, this has been a hot potato that's been thrown in his direction. Doesn't fully appreciate the requirements of the role, and is not particularly inclined to take them up, in which case whoever appointed him needs to unappoint him. I mean, not to be blunt about it, but why would you be a sponsor? The clue's in the title. And if he doesn't want to talk to the ERG that he is a sponsor of, then something else is going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jenny, your point here, important for sponsors to be aware of what the role entails and perhaps even receive training, particularly if they don't have shared lived experience. At our summit last week, board member not in the same country.
That makes a bit more sense.
Yeah, that makes sense as to why maybe you're struggling to connect. At our summit last week in London, we had a sponsor come along to present with so they were presenting a case study, and the sponsor came along to present. It was the disability and neurodiversity ERG that were presenting a case study, and the sponsor was the group CTO. If you go through my post, you'll find it. And he came along to present, co-present, and but he was a very humble guy, and he was like, I don't want to take the shine, and he just gave a little bit of a spiel about why he was very passionate about being a sponsor. And honestly, like, people in the room were blown away, because actually, even though he didn't have lived experience, he talked about that 12 or 13 years ago, he had a colleague who had a son with a disability, and he got an understanding of what it took in terms of caring for that child. And he also got involved in fundraising for the child. So he had a real personal experience that connected him to that community in a way that you wouldn't believe. And then what that freed up was, obviously, so he's the group CTO. So he was then able to literally put developers on what they needed in terms of accessibility. Do you know what I mean? It totally unlocked things because he had a passion for what the network were doing. Like, he totally got it.
Yeah, I think, but I know I said sponsors need to be senior people. I wonder what a board member is. It's not even too senior, but too distant, because a board member is not in the business every day. I'll probably have several board positions, and this is just one of them. And that may contribute to the disconnect. I wonder if you could get a sponsor who is at the head of the actual business, or very senior in the actual business, who has much more skin in the game than, as I say, a board member who may be a little disconnected. And then to that point, whoever they are, being really clear as an ER. So when we meet with our sponsor, he's an amazing guy. He will always say, "What do you need from me?" And we will go with a shopping list. So here are the things, these 3 things. If you could go engage with your peers on these 3 things, we'd be really grateful. And then he will feed back. So as ERGs, I think we have a responsibility. Number one, don't overload them. There's only so much they can engage with at a time, because they are also senior people with a gigantic job. But if they are engaged, if they do understand why they've signed up, then they can and will influence where influence is needed. We have a living ERG, which is centered on the neurodiverse, people with chronic conditions. It's quite a broad and all-encompassing as a term. But our chief product officer is the sponsor of that community. And funnily enough, at our symposium last week, a couple of weeks ago, the charter team of that group said he is amazing, shows up to every meeting, is wholly engaged, is, again, Cheryl, to your point, I don't know what his particular lived experience is, but he's right in it, and it makes all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of where you'll point them from, to your point, Kate, around recognizing sometimes the capacity point, because there are lots of things going on for business, and particularly if I know there is a strategy sometimes if there is a sponsor that is problematic, if you don't necessarily have the support from somebody like a Jenna or somebody in the HR team that can rearrange things and get you the right sponsor. I know that in some organizations people have 2 sponsors, so somebody may well say to that board member, I know that you potentially got capacity constraints, we're going to put a second sponsor on it to support, and maybe you can get more support that way as well.
They may not feel that they can step down, because optics, not being available is not helping your ERG, Sophia, not one bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, the sponsor is absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. I wanted to get on to one of the things you're coaching qualification and that side it's really interesting. And part of the reason I wanted to focus on this a little bit is it's a skill set that a lot of ERG leads either have already or they start to develop it once they move into the ERG space, which I think is really interesting. There's maybe something about that. But how do you use your coaching skills as as co-chair, within, for example, your committee, etc.? Do you find it useful as a skill set to have?
I mean, I use coaching every day. I mean, part of the day job, but yes. Back to that point about when we first set up, it was 3 or 4 really passionate people who, I mean, we were, I'm not sure fortunate, I think we have earned, we're at a point where we could say what we thought and not necessarily be fearful, oh, well, this is going to come back and bite me. And I mean, don't get me wrong, our organization is definitively not like that. But sometimes it's about perception. And there's always individual managers who maybe do behave in a certain way, which is inconsistent with our leadership principles, for example. So when we had our first meeting, or as we had more meetings and the same people showed up, that was when we started to have conversations about, hey, who would like to take the next meeting? And it wasn't just because we're already feeling the weight. It was because you could see there were some really smart, committed, engaged people who just really lacked confidence. Lack the confidence to run a meeting with 50 people, because I do this every day, so it doesn't matter whether there's 50, 500, makes no odds to me. But I get it, there are other people who show up on a Zoom with a bunch of thumbnails and go, oh my god, would I have to talk to all of them? And they would feel like rabbits caught in the headlights. So from a coaching standpoint, my question is always, okay, so what's the worst that can happen? How do we mitigate that? Where are we now? What do you need? How do we do this? That kind of thing. Because the more you can get the individual to answer those questions for themselves, the more you're building eventually independence, where they do feel confident to send out the distribution list, schedule a meeting, send that, and that's how we scale. We scale and sustain the ERG, but also we are through the ERG for those that want to give people new skills, which they will then bring to their work, and that is, that is a big win for the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, coaching as and I'm seeing more organizations that are recognizing the value of coaching as a skill, as a capability within the organization, right, and investing in it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think if you're going to do it, I would say get a decent program. I mean, there's lots of, you can learn to be a coach in a weekend. You can't. I mean, you'd probably walk away with a model, but there are many coaching models, and really the skill is to know which model is most appropriate based on the person in front of you. And unfortunately, the really good programs don't come cheap, but I've never regretted doing the program that I did.
Well, and what about using like coaching for, recognizing and supporting individuals that maybe are close to burnout, right? How would you, is that something that can be useful for those individuals? What could that look like?
Yeah, well, in coaching, coaches are supposed to have coaching supervision. So coach has a coach, and it is one of the reasons why a coach has a coach is expressly to avoid that very thing. I'm not going to lie, I do not have coaching supervision, but I do have Sandra, and I guess we coach each other. So, sometimes she'll say, well, who else could do that? Or why is it you? And vice versa, which is just a good reminder that it's not, we don't have to do everything.
Yeah.
And back to the symposium that we had a couple of weeks ago, we had a really interesting session about pacing yourself. So I think there's probably a particular kind of person that will step up to set up an ERG and run the ERG and that means they take on many things, and they're probably in a bit of a hurry. And I know we were, well, why is it not done? And we said, well, this week, and it's next week already, and the thing didn't happen. We've had to learn to be relaxed about timings.
Yeah.
So if it takes 3 weeks or if it takes 6 weeks, I mean, if the alternative is that you end up doing it yourself, when back to when we started this conversation, do everything, then at some point you just have to go, I'm going to let it go.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that, as you describe it there, that sometimes that fatigue and I don't want to use the term impatience, but that the frustration when things don't happen, and they don't happen in a timely way, that can lead to burnout as well, right? It's pent up disappointment. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And as you were talking there about the supervision, I was reminded of, I almost think, I probably don't see enough ERG leads that are mental health first aiders, or they don't always have that expertise within their committee. And obviously that also comes with supervision as well, or at least it should, in an organization. So definitely something to think about. We are going to wrap things up. We're nearly at the end. It always goes so quickly. What is one thing that organizations can do to help their leaders to really crack this, get good traction and momentum, but avoid the burnout?
I think, as I said, probably halfway through, our HR team has done a really good job. I think what they have done is build the infrastructure and the architecture that enables the ERGs on a continuum of levels of participation and effort and all the rest of it, but it enables us to function. So there is a dedicated person in HR who is the liaison, and she is amazing and hugely committed, is there whenever we have a question. They manage, for example, the budget that we all make a claim on. They will set up new vendors for us. They guide us through that process. So that architecture is super important. And we have a quarterly check-in of the ERG leaders. And that was off the back of feedback probably 2 or 3 years ago, which was already about, this is a lot. And, we're doing all the work. And so we have these regular check-ins where we talk about, okay, so what else can we do? Something else which I haven't touched on, and I know we're nearly at time, is obviously, when you build an ERG, it's focused on one thing. And that completely overlooks, for obvious reasons, intersectionality. And so what we have been encouraged to do by the HR team, which I think is really sensible, is sometimes to put two groups together. So, for example, we have a group that's dedicated to our Latin American, Brazilian colleagues called Somos, and we often do on MCN with them co-events. A couple of years ago, we did something in conjunction with women at Getty. And so you're sort of spreading the load a bit.
Yeah.
And those kind of things are really, really good ways of just, not feeling
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. The spreading the load. I sometimes say to organizations, almost like, think of your ERG leads as like a virtual team. They're like a virtual team, like a hub and spokes, basically. So, when you think about the resources that you have in that, I chaired a meeting yesterday, the first meeting for a client where they were bringing all of their ERG leads together, and on that call, people suddenly realized that, good morning, Junior Beeman, anybody who wants a coach, hey, yeah. People suddenly realized on this call that there are some ERG leads that work in benefits. There are various that work in IT. There, and I was like, this is now a lot of them were meeting each other for the first time. I was like, this is now your virtual team, and if there are, because as you say, the intersectionality and the crossover, there are definitely things that can be worked on together, events, policy, other initiatives, etc. It really sort of like lightens the load. Junior Beeman, another fellow Multicultural Network lead there for you, Kate, and also a coach, right? Which is really interesting as well. Perfect. Where can people connect with you, Kate, if they want to find out more about what you're doing, or if they want to, obviously, Junior is Global Co-Chair of Multicultural Networks, so if you wanted to connect and, run like a sort of like an exchange of ideas or events, etc., where's the best place to get in touch with you?
LinkedIn, probably in the first instance. Kate Philpot. I'm on there. I have let it slide a little bit of late. I'm not going to lie. That's another reason for overwhelm. So I've taken a bit of a conscious step back, but I am on there from time to time. So feel free to drop me a line. It'd be nice to hear from some of you guys.
Yeah, I don't blame you. As I always say, I'm not really on social media. People are like, "What? We see you all the time." I'm really not. I'm just kind of on here, having kind of nuanced conversations. That's kind of my thing, really. Kate, thank you so much. It's been so interesting, and we've gone in a few directions, but hopefully all useful, especially the conversation about what the organisations can do. The sponsors, having the right people in your committee, etc. All really interesting. And for everybody that's joined us in the comments, thank you so much for joining us live on this very hot Friday morning. I hope you weren't like sort of sitting inside melting. Mind you, inside is probably cooler than outside, right? So
I don't know. I feel my office getting hotter by the second.
Oh really? Yeah. See, our home office is upstairs, so I cannot be up there. I have to be downstairs this morning. But thank you, everybody, and to anybody that's watching on the replay as well. Thank you for taking 56 minutes out of your day to check this topic out. And that's it. We are out of there. I will see you